All right, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to CoTec Holdings Corp Investor Update webinar. My name is Alyssa Berry, President at Alliance Advisors, and I will be your moderator for today. A friendly reminder that today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on CoTec's website and YouTube channel. Before we begin, I'd like to note that certain statements made during today's presentation may constitute forward-looking statements. We refer you to the company's disclosures and filings for more information. Today, I am joined by Julian Traeger, President and CEO at CoTec, and we have Eugene Herkin, VP of Finance, here as well, who'll be moderating our Q&A session. With that, I am happy to introduce Julian, who will kick things off. Over to you, Julian.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you all for taking the time to hear the CoTec story. It's been a while since we did an update, so there's lots to talk about. But for those who are new to the name, I thought I would start with a high-level overview as to, why we're so excited about our strategy and why we're really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. CoTec was started 4 years ago with the idea of finding disruptive technologies and then acquiring the assets to apply those technologies to where the technologies effectively were the key to unlocking that value. And that model wasn't really well understood at the time. It was a sort of redefinition of how we see mineral extraction and resource recovery to be modernized for the 21st century. And so we've been, plodding away, executing on the strategy, initially looking for the technologies and now finding the assets to apply those technologies to. But whilst we've been doing that, the world has obviously moved on, and I'm happy to say that I think we were ahead of the pack. We've got a very interesting position, but we're right on message now for what the Western world needs in terms of sourcing critical minerals in the next couple of years. So, unless you've been completely a hermit, you'll obviously be aware that the whole area of strategic minerals has become very timely. The West is developing its own supply chain. The US has announced $19 trillion of inward investment, which is going to require huge amounts of raw materials. The US government is working very hard through the Pentagon to accelerate these sources. We are in regular dialogue with them, and the message is go big and go quickly. And I think they are realizing that recycling and waste is the key to achieving those goals. The traditional methods of, searching for deposits, defining them, developing them, getting them commissioned, and getting up to a nameplate capacity, and then putting those materials through downstream processing. That process takes 10 to 20 years, even with accelerated permitting, whereas the recycling model can produce the materials necessary within 2 to 3 years. So it's a much, much quicker process. And from a CoTec perspective, it's a process which allows us to produce cash flow much more quickly than traditional mining. It's also much less intensive in terms of regulatory scrutiny, because often you are dealing with brownfield restarts. So I think that we are in the right place at the right time. We have significant first mover advantage in that, we were looking for these key technologies several years ago. They are patented. We, have the rights to them. And so it's really a matter of finding the asset opportunities now, which we can apply them to. And so, fast forward 4 years, we have 6 proprietary technologies which answer some of the historic problems bedeviling the mining sector, which is what to do with superfine materials, what to do with very hard rocks, which are difficult to grind, very expensive, and what to do with low-grade materials. And those are the characteristics of much of the waste that's been left behind. So I think we have the solutions to extract the valuable metallic content of waste. And our aim is to get to 25 to 30 assets by the end of the decade. We have one asset which we'll talk about in the form of hypermag, although if you break it down into our ambitions, that could be as much as 7 to 10 individual hubs, which would be like effectively mines. And then we have a number of other iron ore assets as well. So I think we're probably close to having identified 10 asset opportunities, and we need to find another 10 to 15 more in the next year or two. And as we've been doing this, we've also clarified more exactly how CoTec is adding value and what the longer term strategy is for the business. So CoTec, as you may or may not know, is largely owned by the management and the board. We own around 60% of the stock. So we're very interested in capital gains. We are not necessarily interested in growing an empire which doesn't create value for the shareholders and where we take large salaries. And so the greatest capital gain we can create is to incubate very early stage assets which we can buy very cheaply because they're not valuable to other people who don't have access to the key technology which can unlock their value. And then the strategy is to scale those assets and then eventually monetize them by bringing in investors at a higher valuation. So we don't plan to issue vast numbers of shares at the CoTec level. Instead, we are looking to monetize the value of the assets at the asset level. And then once we've scaled individual themes like or rare earth magnet recycling or iron ore or copper or metallic waste, once we've got them to a sufficiently large scale to spin those off to shareholders, potentially through IPOs, or ultimately, we're obviously open to asset sales. So that's the long-term strategy about how we plan to create value for shareholders over time. Partly that strategy is informed by the enormous discount to the sum of the parts CoTec continues to trade at. Although the stock's gone up, I think it's trading nothing like it would if we were very promotional and putting rare earths and magnets in our name. But we have been very, very busy creating large amounts of value, and those we plan to daylight in the coming months. And we will be providing an updated sum of the parts. But we continue to see a 5 to 10x upside from the stock at these levels, which would suggest a stock price of over $10, which you can easily derive from the activities we're already involved with. So we're very excited. We are a team which has enormous experience in the space. We've got a good track record in terms of creating significant value for shareholders, and we're all about execution. So that's the overview. As I said, I think it's a very exciting technology with the $19 trillion coming into the US. and we are only at the beginning of that. We see this strategy as something which is just beginning and will have legs for the next, decade. Uh, Turning away from the high level, but to the individual assets, we have been extremely busy. The technology and the assets which most people are interested in because it's so timely is our magnet recycling business in the form of Hypermag. You'll have seen some announcements today about the way in which we are expanding our source of feedstock as we look to buy different forms of materials in our partnership with ILS. And we are in discussions with a number of feedstock suppliers as well. And those announcements will be coming out in the near term. But the message we've received from the US government, who we are in regular engagement with, is, go fast and go big. And so, whereas early in the year we were looking at really only developing the first site in Texas as a standalone entity and then waiting to do the next two in Nevada and South Carolina, we are accelerating the second bunch. So we would look to bring 3 hubs on stream quite quickly. And we have also laid out a plan where we could eventually have 7 hubs, and depending upon the access to feedstock in the US, that could be expanded further. The first hub is well on track, so it's already 30% developed in terms of the granularity of the plant. But as you will have seen in the past couple of months, there has been quite a lot of publicity about changes in Chinese policies regarding rare earth and machineries for rare earths. And so we have been re-engineering the first plant as well as the second and third plants to increase the domestic content there. That will have increased the capex a bit. But on the other hand, there has been tremendous increases in the price of magnets, particularly in the US, which more than compensate for that. So we will be planning to announce new economics for each hub in the coming 2 or 3 weeks. Suffice it to say that we believe the NPV will have gone up considerably. And since we are now working on 3 hubs rather than 1, we will be incorporating the value of those first 3 hubs into a revised sum of the parts, which we'll be announcing again before the end of the year. So all is moving well there. But because of this re-engineering, we are going to be delaying the notice to proceed date from the end of this year to the end of or to the first quarter of next year. However, we don't expect that to change the start date for production, which continues to be in the middle of 2027. So we think we'll have a more rigorous and self-sufficient design for the plant and the copycat plants in hubs 2 and 3. But it won't affect the ultimate start of cash flow. And one of the great advantages of the CoTec model is that we can be in cash flow, within two years, which is at warp speed by comparison to most other commodity extraction businesses, which take, a decade or longer. So we're very excited about that business. We are also stockpiling materials for starting production, and each hub is now going to have 3 reactors, so 3 different alternative ways of making magnets. And we are also looking at ways in which the mix of magnets versus the magnetic dust can be improved. So we'll end up producing more magnets per plant. Just to remind you that by comparison to our market cap of around 100 million US dollars, the economics for each hub using the Adamas forecast is around $600 million, and CoTec owns 60% of that. So if we have three hubs, that would be $1.8 billion. There'll be some capital associated with the development of that, but I don't think it will be more than you know, $400-500 million. So the net value to CoTec just of those three hubs at those historic valuations is something like $600 or $700 million, which is a 6 to 7x on the current market cap, which is why, in part, we're so confident that there is a 5 to 10x upside from the existing business, and we're very excited to daylight all that value, which we are planning to do in the next couple of weeks, and certainly before Christmas. But Hypermag, whilst it gets the most attention, is not our only asset. So we have two other significant assets which are progressing, and which I'd like to talk about as well. The first of those is our Lac Chenin site in Quebec. We announced, I think it was early this year or last year, that we had drilled half of that site. It had a net present value of around $60 million with $60 million of capex. Since then, we've drilled the other half of the site, and we plan to announce the results for that in Q1. But we also are able to incorporate our salter technology into that site, which can further enhance the value of the output. So, we are confident that ultimately we can show $120 to $150 million of NPV from that business. The capex will not change much, so it will be around $60 million. And CoTec owns 100% of that. So that's another multiple of our existing market cap just in that particular asset. And why we're very excited about Lac Chenin is that we see it as a template for what we can be doing to replicate that in Canada, in the US, and in Australia and Brazil. In Canada alone, there are 10,000 closed mine sites. The liability for rehabilitating those sites sits often with the provincial governments, and that's an enormous amount of money. In the case of Lac Chenin, the government of Quebec has a $200 million rehabilitation liability, and we can really significantly cut that by recycling the asset. So we're looking to cookie cutter roll that out in Canada, working with different state provinces. And then we are also engaging with the Department of Interior in the US about finding similar waste sites in the US. And there are lots of iron ore waste sites in Brazil that we're starting to examine. And so we see great potential for that business. And then our third asset, and by the way, there we have recently formed CoTec Quebec. We have a local board, and we're looking to do more in the Quebec region. The other asset we have in the iron ore space is MagIron. We've been talking about this for a long time, but actually we will be announcing within the next couple of weeks the feasibility study in the 43-101. I've already seen an initial draft of that. It's really quite an incredible asset. We have an inferred resource of 2.6 billion tons, which I think is amongst the largest in North America. We have 180 million tons on the ground. It is permitted. It has water, fresh water. It has railway right there. It has access to green energy right there. And it's another asset whose time has come, because if the US is indeed going to have this tremendous boost with $19 trillion of incoming investment, there's going to be great demand for steel. And here in Minnesota, we can make steel inputs in the US for the US. So we are very excited. The replacement value of the assets is over $1 billion. And we expect the studies to show a significant surplus to that replacement value in terms of the business plan we are forecasting. And as CoTec again has 17% of that asset. So if it's $1.5 billion, for instance, you have another $200 million dollars there of value, which again is another 2x on the existing market cap. We are also busily at work on looking at recycling opportunities for our metallics technologies, which can recycle tungsten, vanadium, titanium, manganese. So we would expect hopefully to have the first of those coming out in the next 6 to 9 months. And we're also hard at work on copper opportunities. We had hoped to conclude one by the end of this year. It will probably be Q1 of next year, but we see a great upside to CoTec copper as well. And once we find the first asset, we'll form the CoTec copper business. So all of that means that we're hard at work. We've been creating I think hundreds of millions of dollars of value. We continue to, as a board, back the business, and we will give you a new sum of the parts in the coming weeks, which will show a very significant uplift from the last one. The last one was around, I think, $3.50. We expect this to be well north of that. So with that summary, I'm very happy to open the session to questions with Eugene Herken, who's going to be moderating those. Eugene.
Thanks, Julian. I just wanted to remind everyone that if they would like to submit a question, they can do so by using the Q&A at the chat at the bottom of your screen. So just with that, the first question that we have come through, this was also a bit of a comment as well. Hi, Julian. First and foremost, would like to congratulate you and CoTec on a fantastic year-to-date positioning CoTec ahead of the game. Can you tell me just how close we are regarding financing and partners for the Hypermag USA? As an investor, I feel like we are on the cusp, but just how great is the opportunity and the interest in the current climate?
So we are busily at work. As I said before, if you think that CoTec itself has a market cap of 100 million, but its share in the Hypermag business could be several multiples of that. We're reluctant to raise funding at the CoTec level in significant amounts for Hypermag. We'd much rather do that at the asset level. It will come as no surprise to you to know that we've been in discussions with the government in the US about helping us with financing. We need to give them some time to move forward with those conversations. But in the meantime, we also received an invitation from the Export-Import Bank for $93 million of debt funding for the first plant. In addition, we are working with commercial banks to get more traditional project financing. And in fact, a number of banks are working on their due diligence, currently. So we'll see where those discussions go. And then we have had some discussions with off-takers about providing funding at an asset level. So if you take some magnets from Hub 2, you would help to fund Hub 2. And suffice it to say, in the current climate, there's no shortage of people who are interested in funding this business. So we're confident that we will have no lack of financing partners at the asset level. But we're starting with the debt piece for the first hub, and then we'll work out where the equity will come from.
Perfect. Thanks, Julian. We have another question that could lead into this from your discussion. What still needs to be considered before you make a decision to proceed with the hypermag in the US?
So I think there are three main elements we want to see. I mean, obviously, we will know that, and we have that already, that it's a viable business. I think the great advantage of the hypermag process versus competing technologies is that the input cost is much, much lower. We don't have to go through the mining of the rare earths and the rare earth separation, which is very, very difficult to do. We have this shortcut process which literally creates the input for the magnets from old magnets within a couple of hours, and it's an incredible short loop which is protected and proprietary, and therefore we have a much higher margin business. But before we move ahead, we will be ensuring that we have enough feedstock to cover the requirements for the plant. It doesn't have to be 100%, but we need to have covered a reasonable proportion of that business. And the banks, if we go that route, will want to see offtake customers again for a reasonable percentage of the business. So those are the things, together with making sure we've got the financing tied down, that are the key gating items before we make the decision to proceed.
Perfect. And actually, on that note, Julian, maybe we'll answer two questions. So how can the government help with securing feedstock, or what kind of involvement would they have in order to help facilitate that? And then how are we allocating capital to stockpile this scrap?
Well, those are two separate questions. I think in terms of the government, I mean, we have had in the US, we've had a number of discussions, and we have been lobbying for them to ban the export of e-waste. The irony is, at the moment, a lot of the magnets that the US has, when they're not being used anymore, get shredded, and then that's exported. And there's a huge opportunity cost in not capturing those magnets and keeping them in the US. So that is something we are pushing, and I think the US government is also looking at ways in which corporate America could implement policies to recycle magnets, or provide the feedstock to recyclers like us, and then on the other side become the customers of the recycled magnets when they are produced. So the government is definitely on top of this, and as I said in my introductory comments, what's gratifying is that they seem to understand that recycling is the key to getting independence. I think it's going to be very difficult to do that within 1 year, but it is going to be possible in 2 to 3 years, and that is like light speed by comparison to the more traditional methods, which are also out there, but are going to take much longer to implement. And Eugene, what was the second question?
And it was in terms of capital allocation.
Yeah. So we are allocating capital. The more we can find. I mean, I don't think we're going to be allocating tens of millions of dollars, but we're very happy to allocate single millions of dollars to stockpiling the material. And one of the interesting aspects of the stockpiling is that if we are stockpiling hard disk drives rather than magnets, there's a big credit that comes with the reprocessing of those hard disk drives, which reduces the net cost to us of the magnet. So in a way, the stockpiling can also enhance our margins. So we're very happy to put some money to work there, and also to give confidence to the bankers that we have more than enough material to operate the plant.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Julian. And maybe you can comment a little bit how the government shutdown impacted the timing of awards and grants, and if we had any visibility over that.
Well, I think it hasn't accelerated that, uh, but they are very interested in what we're doing. We see the hypermag process as an insurance policy, as a sort of plan B, which is different to the more conventional ways of recycling magnets, and I think the government in the US appreciates that. So, they need time to do their thing. But going back to the opening comments, we are in the right place at the right time with a real proprietary technology, which is not theoretical. It is producing thousands of magnets already in the UK. The plant in the UK is a bigger plant is starting up. The German plant is going to be starting as well very shortly. So, all of that's very helpful for us because it informs the detailed US engineering and validates the commercial scale processes. It's not something which is not provable.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julian. We'll just move on. Maybe there's a couple questions on mag iron, and they're asking if we can explain if the mag iron NPV will include the in situ resource, or will it just be to process the tailings?
At the moment, it's just to process the tailings. I mean, I have argued, as you can imagine, that we should attribute some value to the inferred resource, particularly if it's one of the biggest, or if the biggest even, potentially in the US. As I said, it's 2.6 billion, but that doesn't actually cover the whole deposit. We think it could be even closer to 3 billion tons. So, we might attribute a small value to that in the NPV as well.
Okay, great. And maybe there's a question here on the technology for tungsten recycling. So maybe if you could comment a little bit on that and how it works.
So we have, two technologies. The technologies which are applicable to iron ore are also applicable to tungsten. So we have the gravity separation technology of Salter, which relies upon the different densities of different materials to separate them out and therefore concentrate them. So we can, reprocess tungsten tailings and separate the waste from the tungsten and therefore concentrate up the tungsten. And then we also have, through our interest in binding solutions, the cold pelletizing technology. So if there was any need for that, we can not only produce tungsten concentrate, but tungsten pellets as well.
Okay, great. Julian, so I think we're running up against our time for today's call. So we'll wrap things up here. If we didn't get to your questions, or if anything comes to mind afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@cotec.ca, and we will get back to you in due course. Thanks for everybody for joining the call today and for your continued interest and support. This concludes today's call, and you may now disconnect.